few things to work out, but better late than never. And today I decided to do something much more healthier since the last two things I did were kind of on the unhealthy side. We did a dessert and then we did Alfredo, which isn't really the healthiest of things to do. Plus, it kind of leaves out a lot of the vegetarians and vegans as well. And I didn't want to leave them excluded as much. So the one thing that I wanted to do, which is my personal favorite to make, I don't make it as often, but whenever I have an excess of vegetables in my fridge, I make sure that I take the time to make this every once in a while. And it's probably my favorite. It's a Spanish dish called Gazpacho. And essentially what Gazpacho is almost like a blended soup, preferably cold, almost always cold, of assortment of vegetables. And the vegetables that I'll be using for Gazpacho is going to be about a pound of tomatoes. These are Roma tomatoes. These are only because they were the cheapest I can find here in California. But you can also use slicing tomatoes, anything of that sort. Just remember that you need about a pound and a half at the most. If you don't have enough tomatoes, you can also use some tomato juice. And this is just your standard tomato juice that I had. Again, they usually mix it with water and cut it with stuff like that to make sure that it's a bit economical for them. So I always recommend adding just a few tomatoes just to kind of get past that kind of strange aftertaste you'll have. The next thing you'll need is about one red bell pepper, half of this actually, so you can save the other half for some other recipe that you have, but you'll need a red one. Don't use green if you can, because green is a lot more bitter than the red bell pepper, but if you're in a pinch, you can use the green one as well. The next thing you'll need is a onion. Now, preferably you want a purple or red onion, and that's because the flavor profile is going to be a lot different from this type of onion. And this is just your standard white onion. So this is okay to use. Again, if you don't have it at home, don't worry about it. Just mentioning that preferably you want a red onion. And the next thing is a cucumber, preferably this size, which is going to add up to roughly around a cup of finely chopped cucumber. You can go over or under. Again, the proportions of the vegetables are really not that much of a concern. The only thing you need to make sure you have a good proportion of is your jalapeno. You don't want a lot. It's not going to be spicy, and we're going to remove the seeds. And again, your tomatoes. You want to have more tomatoes than vegetables. The other things you'll need are, I don't say they're optional, but they don't really add too much to the flavor, just enough to kind of make a good I would say a acidic and maybe even savory taste to it as well. So you're going to want some balsamic vinegar, preferably about a couple, actually not even that. You would only need about half a teaspoon of balsamic vinegar. And this is just one of the ones I've had lying around. I don't use balsamic vinegar too much, but it's really good to use if you have it lying around. This is something that if you are vegan or vegetarian, you can completely skip this step. You can even use soy sauce if you need to as well as kind of a supplement to this. But you're going to need some Worcestershire sauce, which is basically a fermented salty sauce. Again, that kind of adds a bit of a savory taste to it. And while there's not too much that compares to this kind of sauce, we're using only about a half teaspoon at the most. So you can actually omit this if you're vegan or if you just don't care for fermented anchovies. You can use soy sauce instead as a supplement, or you can just don't care about this at all, omit it out. And then for taste, you're going to want to put some salt. Again, I don't like putting too much salt, but my family enjoys salt, so I'll be putting some in there. Some black pepper. Again, it's all going to be about half teaspoon's worth of everything. And some ground cumin. So again, you just want to use about half teaspoon of everything. So you don't need too much. And I just have some measuring spoons here to help me measure that half teaspoon. I have a potato peeler, and this is actually going to help you having your tomatoes ready when you're getting them ready for the gazpacho, you always need a chef's knife or any sort of standard knife of this sort. You don't want anything small or serrated because anything such as vegetables or really any kind of chopping and cutting that you'll do, you're going to have a much harder time with a small steak knife or anything of that sort. So I always recommend something like this, something smooth, something that you can sharpen, and something that's simple. You don't want anything too complex. If some people may have ceramic coated knives, and those are fine too. I have a few of those, but you won't be able to sharpen them as easily. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is actually prepare all of our tomatoes. And we're going to put everything in a blender. So I have my blender jar here. I just washed it, so you can see a little bit of water in it, and that's perfectly fine. So the first thing we're going to do is put some tomatoes in there, just at the bottom. So the typical way to peel a tomato, since you don't want the skin in there, is to actually boil these for probably, I'd say at the most 50 seconds, maybe a minute max. And then you actually just want to quickly grab the tomato and put it in an ice bath. And while it's in that ice bath, you can actually move the skin off of the tomato. And that's usually the standard way of peeling a tomato. But whenever I'm in a pinch, or if I don't care too much for the tomato being a little messy, what I do is I actually just get a slit on the tomato with my knife, just to kind of puncture the skin. And with my potato peeler, you can easily just peel the tomato. And you can see that it's coming out relatively easy. You always want to make sure you're peeling away from you and not towards you, because you don't want to get your fingers cut. And if you don't think it's sharp enough to happen, it does happen. I've done it a few times, and it's not fun to have that happen. So you just want to peel. Doesn't have to be too exact. You just want to get all of the skin off from the body. This part's not as important. You can cut that off at the end. But I usually leave it there as a sign to show me when I'm done. And I have a garden outside, so I typically get all of these trimmings and throw them outside in my garden. And that usually helps out a lot with fertilizing the ground, so nothing goes to waste. Okay, that's one tomato. And so you can just go ahead and get the tomato and cut it. And that's one. Now, to make sure if it fits in your blender, I have a large jar, but just to show you, just make sure you have your tomato on its side or upright, just something that won't roll away, and then just go ahead and cut it in half and maybe in the fourths as well. And this is just to make sure everything fits in your blender evenly, since not everyone's going to have a 64-ounce jar. Throw that in there. We have our other tomato. So if you don't want to bother with the peeling method, you can also just cut it like normal, but if you can see, you're losing a lot of the flesh whenever you do that. That's why I prefer peeling it. It takes a little more time than your typical tomato, but you save a lot more of the flesh. Doing it like this is really, it's faster, but you can see that you're losing a lot more of the tomato. So yes, we had half a tomato in there, but we lost most likely 10% of that tomato. And so we'll do our last two. So again, if you're seeing, I'm always keeping my fingers curled whenever I'm having the knife near my other hand. That's just to make sure that I don't cut my fingers if there's a slip. You can take your time with it, don't go too fast. The last thing you want is to nick at your fingers. And I always do it this way as well whenever it's getting a little warmer, since right now it's pretty nice day outside. but as a result, it is a little warmer in the house. So doing the boiling method with the tomato is not really a good idea in the kitchen, since most likely what's going to happen is it's just going to warm everything up. And with a cold soup such as this, I really don't want to have things a bit longer than they are now. So just cutting it. Again, I recommend saving all the trimmings just so you can throw them outside, or if you don't have a garden, that's fine, you can't throw them away, but whenever you're working with vegetables, it's usually just a good idea to kind of compost everything if you can. Okay. So you can see all of the skin is removed on this one as well. And then for this, I'm just going to remove the stem off. Okay. And then our last one. Another method that you can use in case the tomato is a little bit soft is actually kind of have a zigzag motion when you're going down the tomato. And this is just to make sure that, again, it doesn't slip off, but you don't want to go too hard. Again, if you put strain on the tomato with the peeler, what's most likely going to happen is you're going to put too much pressure and it will slip or crush the tomato, and the peeler is going to go straight into your finger, most likely your index. And I've had that happen to me a few times when I was too impatient. So something like this, you just want to take your time. You're not heating anything up. You don't have to worry about things melting. You're just blending everything together at the end. So you really don't have to worry about this. And if you don't have a full-size blender at home, you can also just stick all of this inside of a container or pot and use an immersion blender. That's basically just a relatively inexpensive handheld blender. Just has a little blade at the end and you can just stick it in there. The only issue is it may not be strong enough to kind of blend everything into a fine soup. So it may take longer than your typical blender, but again, that's fine. You just want to make sure that you leave it in there for some time. So now with the tomato cut, we're going to throw that in there as well. And this, usually with gazpacho, you actually don't want to have the seeds included, and you would actually crush the tomatoes to make juice. But I prefer having the entire tomato in there, since I believe it's a little wasteful to kind of not have it crushed. But if you prefer no seeds in it, or if your blender can't blend it as finely, definitely just kind of hold it over a strainer and crush the tomatoes into a bowl. So with that removed, okay. Now this is just here. We're going to peel our last thing, which is going to be a cucumber. So again, I usually put a little slit just to make sure that I can cut through. And that makes it a lot easier to get at the cucumber. Again, you're doing it away from yourself, not towards you. I'm just putting a light amount of pressure to cut through the cucumber. It's okay if you miss the part near your hand. You can turn it around and do the other side later. The cucumber is completely peeled. And then we can just cut the little tip off right here. Okay, and with your knife again, just go ahead and cut the end off. And while that's going on, I'm gonna make sure that I don't throw these away. I'm gonna grab another bowl just to stick them in. Okay. So, the cucumber, I'll just leave them in the jar right here. So when you're not eating these, this is just to make sure that I put them in my compost. I don't want to waste anything like that. Okay. So the next thing is you're going to want some garlic action. I didn't mention this before, but you just want about 1 clove, about medium size, nothing too crazy. Garlic isn't really that essential, but it does add a nice aromatic taste to it. So again, how I mentioned it before, you kind of want to just squeeze the garlic a little bit so you kind of move the dry sections away from the clove. And with that, you can just cut it again, and preferably you want to mince this garlic. So with that, you're just going to, again, having your little fingers curled, you're just going to cut it and move your fingers back, pressing the knife against almost your knuckles right here. Your knuckles right here, right here. So you're actually going to move your fingers back, and with a downward and sliding motion, you can see that you're cutting the garlic finely. And then again, you can go ahead, turn it around, and do the same thing. Just pressing the garlic down so that doesn't move. And just with a downward slicing motion. That's it. So, with this garlic, we can put this straight into the container. I'll just take this cucumber out. Let's take the garlic in. Okay. And same thing with the cucumber. What you can do actually with this is, with your finger, slice it, put your hand over it, and just push it down. It's okay if it's uneven, you're blending the entire thing anyway, so it doesn't have to be too perfect. But now that it's sliced in half, you can just go ahead and do the same method. And you don't really have to mince this. It's small enough already, and it'll definitely fit into the jar. Now the last cucumber. Okay. Okay, so cucumbers in there. Now we're going to need about a cup's worth of chopped onion. So, best thing you can do to get an onion out is to cut this in half or cut the tips, but you basically just want to have a workable surface. Having it rounded is going to get you nowhere if you're going to try to cut it like this. So having them like this makes it a lot easier. Plus, now that you cut it, you can actually easily reach into the outer layer of the onion and peel it off. Again, we're putting all of this in our compost, so it's going to go to the left. And you don't want to take off too much of the onion. It's okay if you see some green there, You just want to get out all of the dry spots. So let's take one more layer just to be sure. There we go. And we'll just cut this off. And now we have our onion. And again, with this onion, we're going to do the same exact thing. I'm just going to reach and peel it out. And this way you don't have onion fumes going everywhere. You will get it with this kind of onion. Most onions will do that. And really there's not much you can do to get rid of the fumes. You can try wearing a mask, you can put a towel over and cut it, but then you're not going to see your fingers. So I usually just power through it, especially since I'm doing a quick chop. It really won't matter. So you're just going to do the same thing as before. Again, you don't have to rush through. This is about a cup. I'm just going to throw this in here. Best way to measure is also to say if it's a handful. If you have average sized hands, mine are actually kind of big, so I'll put a little more than a cup there. But again, it doesn't matter as long as you have some onion in there. So the next thing is our jalapenos. So I have a slightly high pain tolerance when it comes to any sort of chili peppers. I've definitely touched my eyes with a chili pepper. I've had chili pepper fumes in my nose. So I've definitely struggled with the jalapeno or anything higher than that before. But when you're cutting these, the only thing is you just want to make sure you just don't wash your hands afterwards or don't touch your eyes or don't do anything like that. This isn't strong enough to really cause any sort of reaction on your fingers, such as like a habanero, anything like that. So you don't have to worry about touching it when you're cutting it. But if it's going to cause you any worry, just wear some rubber gloves when you're doing this. That should be enough. So again, you're going to cut this down there, and you're going to cut it in half. And so you can actually see that. And I actually use my fingers when I do it, because again, I'm not too worried about the chili pepper. But you want to get rid of all of the vein, which is this little light green part, almost white. And you just want to remove all of that from here. You don't have to do all of the vein, especially if you want to leave some spice, but it also adds a bit of bitter taste to it as well. So you don't want too much, just enough so that it's cleaned out. And again, you just want to reach in and pull it out. And because all the seeds are attached to the vein, you don't even have to worry about scooping all the seeds out. They usually come out the second you move the vein. And there we go. We have our jalapeno peppers. You can just throw those in there. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is just clear this cutting board once more. There's our bell pepper. So again, same thing as the chili pepper. You're going to want to cut this in half and cut it down. So what you'll do is you'll just cut in half. And you see you have your stem just like the jalapeno pepper. So you can actually just grab that and pull the entire thing out. And again, you're going to have a little bit of stem left in there, and that's perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and do this. Okay, and there you have it. So now you can just throw this in there, and that's done. Now the last thing we have is going to be some of our juice. So we'll just throw that in there. Okay. you will also want about a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And I forgot to mention this, but preferably you will want extra virgin. If you have regular olive oil, that's fine as well. But it has to be olive oil, just to make sure you have the right taste. So you're just gonna put your olive oil in there. You're gonna have a little bit of black pepper. Okay. And now you're going to want to put a 1/2 teaspoon of each. So what that includes is going to be your salt. So you just want to put a little bit of salt in. 1/2 teaspoon. Your cumin. And this one you're just going to want to put again at a 1/2 teaspoon. Your Worcestershire sauce. So again, I think this one's brand new actually. Yes it is. Okay, so you're just going to want to put about a 1/2 teaspoon, excuse me. It seems like this one is new. Oh, look at that. Let's just go ahead and cut this open. Okay. As you can see, we rarely use Worcestershire sauce. But it's something that's put a lot in Gazpacho. People make anything like a clamato or a Bloody Mary. We use this as well. So we're just going to put a little bit. Actually, let's use our measuring spoon just to be sure. So we're just going to add a 1/2 teaspoon. And then same thing with our balsamic vinegar. Again, it's only for just little minor flavors. And then this is pretty essential. Again, forgot to mention this, but you're going to want about 1 lime's worth, not key lime, just a regular lime, of lime juice. You can do a little bit more if you want to get more of that flavor with it, but it has to be at least 1 lime. I'm just going to throw that in there as well. Okay. And now that everything is mixed together, we can go ahead and cover it up. If you want it even colder, you can throw some ice in there. It's better to blend everything all together. And so we're just gonna use our blender and just start slowly from 1 and bring it up until it gets to a nice fast speed to pulverize everything together into a soup. So we'll let this go for now. So if you had it in the blender long enough, you'll see that it is completely blended together into a soup. And that's how you make gazpacho. So if you want to prepare it, you can get a little bowl or something larger, pour it in, you can get some parsley if you want to kind of garnish it. And that's it. Serve it cold. Alright, so that's basically all that I have for today. That's how you make gazpacho. So again, if you're vegan, vegetarian, I recommend omitting the Worcestershire sauce and just sticking with some soy sauce instead. It'll have kind of a not too similar, but similar enough profile to kind of add that salty savoriness to your gazpacho. If you want to make any modifications to it, add some carrot, add some different types of bell peppers, maybe make it more spicier, you can most definitely do that. You can make it however you want. The entire premise of gazpacho is just to make sure you have enough tomatoes, you have a little bit of something savory to it, or acidic, so you want to have some lime and some vinegar and maybe soy sauce or Worcestershire sauce to the side. And again, you just want to make sure that you serve it cold. It's a cold, refreshing vegetable soup that you can have. And the thing with it is also, it's great for a summer day, it's great for when it's spring, you can even have it when it's winter out. But the best part is, you can make it your own and you can make it relatively quickly. Again, you can even have the vegetables frozen on the side, so then you can make it more like a smoothie. But that's how you make gazpacho. So tune in for next week for the simple cooking stream when we're doing something else. Most likely I'll try to keep it relatively healthy again, but if not, I'll probably stick to something with baking, since that's usually my forte. But if not, that's basically it. And if you have any questions, leave a comment. If anything, you can even send an email to simplecookingstream@gmail.com. And that's basically it. So thank you very much.